The day my parents pushed me off a cliff wasn't even the worst day of my childhood. It was just the moment I finally understood what I had always feared. I was completely invisible. I remember standing in that huge mansion in Aspen, Colorado. Snow drifted gently outside, frosting the windows in delicate patterns. But inside, the house felt colder than any winter I'd ever known. I was 8, and while most children my age dreamed of dolls or toys, I dreamed of my parents noticing me, just once. Robert, my father, was the kind of man whose laughter filled rooms at lavish parties, but fell into silent indifference at home. My mother, Sarah, wore designer gowns, each stitch precisely sewn to showcase her perfection, yet she never spared a glance for me when no one was around to witness her performance. I spent my childhood quietly in the shadows. My only true friend was a worn teddy bear named Benny, whose ears frayed from countless whispered secrets. Our maid, Mary, was the closest thing I had to a parent. Her warm hands and soft voice always a gentle refuge after the cold silences left by my parents. One winter afternoon, I stood in the hallway near my father's study, Benny clutched tight against my chest. I heard my parents' voices behind the heavy oak door, tense, almost frantic. "How could you be so reckless, Robert? We're drowning in debt," my mother hissed. "We have a way out," my father replied coldly. "The insurance policy on Emma, it's $5 million." My heart froze, a shiver traveling down my spine. Even at 8, I knew something felt terribly wrong. Yet my innocent mind quickly brushed it aside. I trusted them blindly, still hoping deep down they loved me. I retreated to my bedroom, confused and uneasy. Benny felt heavier in my arms, and as I sat on my bed, I tried to ignore the ache building in my chest. That night, sleep came slow and restless, shadowed by vague, uneasy dreams. I didn't realize it then, but life as I knew it was about to end, and a far darker chapter was about to begin. 2 days later, my father woke me early, something he'd never done before. He stood at the edge of my bed, silent and cold, his eyes distant. "Get up, Emma," he said simply, no warmth in his voice, no gentle smile. "We're going for a drive." It wasn't a request. I dressed quickly, heart pounding uncertainly beneath my wool sweater. As I walked downstairs, my mother stood waiting, wrapped in a luxurious mink coat. Her perfume hung heavily in the air, sharp and suffocating. Outside, the world was cloaked in white, snowflakes falling softly, deceptively peaceful. I climbed into the back seat of our Mercedes, my father driving silently, my mother beside him, staring straight ahead. Their silence felt thick, heavy enough to crush me. We drove up winding mountain roads, higher and higher into the Rockies, each mile carrying us farther from home, farther from safety. I clutched Benny tightly, trying to steady my trembling fingers. "We're going to take some beautiful pictures," my mother finally said, forcing a smile in the rearview mirror. Her eyes, though, told a different story. Anxious, tense, almost afraid. We parked near a deserted overlook. My father stepped out first, pacing slowly to the cliff's edge, staring down into the void below. I hesitated at the car door, suddenly terrified of something I couldn't yet understand. "Come on," my mother urged, voice strained, guiding me gently yet firmly to where my father stood waiting. The wind was harsh, stinging my cheeks. Below us, the valley stretched endlessly, trees dark and shadowed beneath a blanket of snow. "Give me your bear," my father ordered sharply. My heart jolted. "But, now Emma," he demanded, voice colder than the icy air around us. Reluctantly, I handed Benny over, watching as he tossed my last comfort into the car, shutting the door with a firm finality that echoed painfully in my chest. "Closer to the edge, sweetheart," my mother whispered, her hand pressing softly but insistently against my back. My tiny feet shuffled forward, snow crunching beneath them, heart hammering. Suddenly, I felt something shift, a subtle, horrifying certainty. I turned, meeting my mother's gaze. Her eyes glistened with tears, but she didn't pull me back. Instead, she stepped away, looking down. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Before I could process her words, I felt the sudden, violent shove against my shoulders, my father's strong hands pushing me forward. My scream caught sharply in my throat as I stumbled, hands grasping desperately at empty air. The world spun around me, snowflakes swirling, cliffs blurring, my parents' faces fading into darkness as gravity took hold. And as I fell into that terrifying void, one heartbreaking thought tore through me. They had never loved me at all. The first sensation I remember clearly after the fall was the cold, bitter and merciless, gripping every inch of my small, fragile body. The cold sank deep into my bones, numbing me until it felt like I would never feel warmth again. For a brief, terrifying moment, I thought I was dead, trapped somewhere between life and whatever comes next. Then I heard voices, distant yet reassuringly human, breaking through the frozen stillness. "Tom, wait, did you hear that?" A woman's voice, clear yet gentle, called out urgently. "Could be the wind," a man answered, cautious and measured. "No, listen again," she insisted, voice sharp with instinct. "There's someone down there, I can feel it." I tried to call out, to scream, but only a weak groan escaped my trembling lips. Pain surged, immediate and fierce, radiating from my chest down through my limbs. Every breath was a battle. Suddenly, beams of light pierced the darkness as footsteps crunched hurriedly through the snow toward me. My eyelids flickered weakly open, vision blurred. Through swollen eyes, I saw two figures. One knelt gently beside me, her eyes wide, deeply compassionate. "Oh my God, Tom, it's a child!" she gasped softly, reaching carefully to brush snow and strands of tangled hair from my face. Her touch was gentle, warm against my frozen skin, and I instinctively leaned into it despite the pain. "Don't move her too much, Martha," the man advised quietly. His voice was steady, strong, a comforting presence beside her. "We need to call this in." While he radioed urgently for help, Martha lifted my head gently, carefully placing a folded jacket beneath it. I trembled uncontrollably in her hands, tears suddenly filling my eyes as my senses gradually returned, bringing back cruel memories of my parents, the betrayal etched deeply into my heart. Martha seemed to sense the storm raging silently within me. "Shh, you're safe now, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice a soothing balm. She wrapped a thick woolen blanket around my small, shaking frame, cradling me with a maternal warmth I'd never experienced before. When help finally arrived, lights flashed in vivid bursts of red and blue, slicing through the darkness. Paramedics carefully transferred me to a stretcher. Even as they secured straps gently around me, my gaze remained fixed on Martha, terrified to lose sight of the first person who had shown me true kindness. "Martha," I whispered weakly, voice shaking. "I'm here, Emma," she reassured softly, her warm hand gripping mine tightly. "We won't leave you, I promise." At the hospital, chaos swirled around me. Voices urgent, hands probing, needles and monitors surrounding me in an overwhelming blur. Yet through it all, Martha and Tom remained beside me, two steady pillars amid the whirlwind. They spoke quietly with doctors, their presence calm yet protective. Days turned to weeks as my battered body slowly healed. Martha rarely left my bedside, reading softly to me from worn books, holding my hand as nightmares shook me awake, and wiping tears I could no longer hold back. Gradually, I began to trust that her kindness wasn't fleeting. It was genuine and unwavering. Eventually, the day came when Martha and Tom took me to their small, humble home, a modest cabin near the edge of the woods, warm and inviting, filled with the smell of fresh bread and burning logs. I stood hesitantly in the doorway, eyes wide, taking in the cozy living room scattered with worn furniture, faded family photos hanging lovingly along the walls. "Welcome home, Emma," Tom said warmly, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Home. A word that, until then, had meant nothing but cold silence and emptiness. My chest tightened painfully, emotions battling within me. I felt Martha kneel beside me, eyes warm, understanding. "This is your home now," she whispered, squeezing my hand reassuringly. "You're safe, loved, and no one can hurt you here." In the following months, I learned what it meant to belong somewhere. Evenings were filled with laughter and gentle storytelling. Mornings began with Martha patiently showing me how to mix pancake batter. Simple things I'd never known, a hug, a smile at the breakfast table, or comforting words before sleep, slowly rebuilt pieces of me that I'd thought were lost forever. Yet even in those peaceful moments, memories of that cliff still haunted me. At night, images of my parents' cold faces crept silently into my dreams, waking me in terrified, breathless sobs. But each time, Martha appeared at my bedside, softly whispering reassurance, gently stroking my hair until sleep returned. One chilly afternoon, I watched Martha sewing quietly by the fire, her hands moving skillfully and gracefully, carefully stitching the torn sleeve of an old dress. Fascinated, I approached slowly. Could you teach me how to do that? I asked, voice shy but hopeful. She glanced up, eyes brightening. Of course, Emma. Come here. I sat beside her, heart pounding nervously as she guided my small hands through the first clumsy stitches. It was difficult, frustrating at first, but Martha patiently showed me again and again until finally something clicked. With every stitch, I felt a strange calmness, a quiet strength, building within me, as if I were slowly mending something far deeper than just fabric. As I grew older under their care, sewing became my sanctuary. Each creation was a silent expression of healing, every garment stitched together pieces of myself I'd long forgotten or abandoned. Martha and Tom cheered softly, displaying my small creations proudly throughout our home, giving me confidence and purpose I'd never known. Yet even as I thrived in their warmth, a part of me still feared trust, still questioned if I truly deserved their love. My scars, though hidden, were deep and real, reminding me that healing wasn't quick or easy. It was a lifelong journey, messy yet undeniably powerful. And though I didn't yet fully grasp the strength I'd begun to build, I knew one truth clearly. I was no longer alone, and I never would be again. Years passed like gentle waves, smoothing away the sharp edges of my traumatic childhood. By 16, I'd become comfortable in the cozy simplicity of our cabin. Yet beneath the surface of my newfound peace, I still felt fragments of pain, moments when memories rose, powerful enough to steal my breath and pull me back into the darkness. At those times, Martha's warm presence was my anchor, quietly pulling me back into reality. One rainy afternoon, Martha invited me into her small sewing room, a place that felt like another world entirely. Shelves overflowed with vibrant fabrics, boxes filled with buttons, ribbons, and delicate lace lined the walls. The scent of lavender sachets lingered softly in the air. Martha gestured toward a stack of fabric, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Emma, why don't you pick something? Anything you like. I hesitated, fingertips brushing softly over bolts of silk and cotton, each texture awakening curiosity within me. Finally, I settled on a soft blue fabric, the color reminding me of a clear sky after a heavy storm, calming, hopeful. Beautiful choice, Martha praised gently. Let's make something special together. The next hours passed quickly, filled with laughter and quiet concentration. Under Martha's patient guidance, my hesitant hands learned to cut patterns, sew seams, and carefully shape fabric into something entirely new. Every stitch felt therapeutic, as if sewing allowed me to express everything I'd been too afraid to say aloud. As weeks turned to months, sewing grew from a simple hobby into my passion. I started sketching my own designs, carrying a small notebook wherever I went. My sketches captured emotions I struggled to verbalize, designs bold and colorful, delicate yet strong. Each creation was a quiet rebellion against my painful past, a whispered promise that beauty could emerge from darkness. One chilly autumn day, I nervously showed Martha my latest design, a gown drawn with flowing lines, vibrant colors swirling boldly across the page. Her eyes widened with genuine amazement. Emma, this is remarkable, she whispered, gently touching the sketch as if it were precious. You have an incredible gift. You could really do something special with this. Her words sparked something powerful within me, igniting dreams I'd barely dared imagine. But I wasn't sure how to transform these dreams into reality, until Martha suggested I consider applying to design schools. Me? A real designer? I questioned uncertainly, heart pounding nervously at the mere thought. Do you really think I can? I don't just think, I know you can, she answered firmly, eyes warm with absolute conviction. Encouraged by her unwavering support, I spent countless nights perfecting my portfolio, sewing late into the evening beneath the soft glow of my desk lamp. Each creation was more intricate, ambitious, and deeply personal. With each finished piece, I felt stronger, slowly reclaiming control over the story of my life. Finally, the day came when an envelope arrived from Parsons School of Design. I stood frozen in our kitchen, letter trembling in my hand, heart thundering nervously in my chest. Martha and Tom stood quietly behind me, offering silent encouragement. Slowly, I unfolded the letter. My eyes scanned anxiously, breath catching sharply as I read the words clearly printed across the page. Congratulations, Emma. You've been accepted. My knees weakened with joy, tears filling my eyes as Martha immediately hugged me, warmth and pride radiating from her. We're so proud of you, sweetheart, Tom said, his voice thick with emotion, his steady hand gently resting on my shoulder. Arriving in New York City was both exhilarating and terrifying. The city was immense, bustling, alive with endless possibilities, so different from the quiet safety of the mountains I'd known. Classes challenged me immediately, demanding creativity, courage, and vulnerability. Yet each day I grew more confident, fueled by the quiet strength Martha had instilled within me. One evening, during an internship at a prominent fashion house, I presented my first original design to the head designer, a sleek evening gown inspired by my journey. She examined it carefully, brows furrowing thoughtfully. "There's something special here," she finally said, eyes meeting mine sharply. "Your design tells a story. What inspired it?" I hesitated, heart racing. Could I share my truth with this successful woman who hardly knew me? "My past," I confessed softly, voice barely audible. "This dress represents healing, survival, moving forward." She nodded slowly, her expression softening with genuine respect. "That's exactly why it's powerful. Never lose that authenticity, Emma. It will set you apart." Her words resonated deeply, guiding me through each new challenge I encountered. By graduation, I'd transformed, not only into a skilled designer, but into someone who could openly acknowledge her scars and channel them into powerful art. At 28, with Martha and Tom proudly by my side, I finally opened my first boutique on Rodeo Drive. As I stood at the door that sunny morning, the glass windows reflecting a woman I'd fought tirelessly to become, I realized my journey was never about forgetting or erasing my past. It was about reclaiming it, piece by piece, and reshaping it into something beautiful. Yet even amidst the warmth and success of that morning, a whisper of uncertainty still lingered, a quiet reminder that healing isn't simple, straightforward, or ever fully complete. But as customers stepped inside, their eyes shining with wonder, I finally understood that imperfection wasn't weakness, it was strength, courageously sewn into every fiber of my being. My boutique quickly became more than just a store. It was a testament to survival, a celebration of resilience woven into each dress I designed. Every evening, as sunlight faded, I sat quietly sketching, grateful for how far I'd come, but also aware that healing is never fully complete. The scars remained, quietly hidden beneath success and smiles, still tender if touched too deeply. One particular afternoon, a subtle sense of unease settled around me. Customers drifted in and out, the quiet hum of conversation filling the air. As I carefully adjusted a mannequin in the window, the door chime rang softly. Without turning, I called out warmly, "Welcome in! Let me know if I can help with anything." No answer came, only a heavy silence. Confused, I turned slowly and froze, heart lurching painfully. Standing awkwardly near the entrance were two figures I hadn't seen in decades, my parents. Robert's shoulders were now slumped, his once confident face lined and weary. Sarah, noticeably aged and fragile, clutched a tattered handbag nervously. The memory of their betrayal surged sharply, an ache I hadn't felt so intensely in years. My pulse thundered in my ears, my carefully maintained composure slipping. "What are you doing here?" My voice sounded colder than intended, shaky with suppressed emotion. Sarah stepped forward, desperation flickering in her tired eyes. "Emma, we've missed you." Robert shifted uneasily, his eyes darting around, taking in the elegant boutique with a calculating glance that made my stomach tighten. "We heard you've become quite successful." I felt my fists clench involuntarily. The anger I'd worked years to control threatened to burst forth, yet I held myself steady. "Please get to the point. I know you didn't come here just to reminisce." Sarah's expression faltered, eyes brimming suddenly with tears, tears I'd seen before, manipulative and familiar. "We're struggling, Emma. Your father, we've had difficulties. We hoped maybe you could help us. Just a small loan, perhaps." My heart sank with disappointment, but not surprise. I took a careful breath, trying to steady my shaking voice. "Even now, after all these years, you're still using me." Robert stepped closer, anger flickering in his eyes, quickly masking his desperation. "We're your parents. Doesn't family mean anything to you?" The bitter irony of his words twisted painfully within me. Memories flashing rapidly, me, small and terrified, tumbling down that cliff, their faces distant, cold. My chest tightened sharply. "Family?" I repeated softly, voice trembling with barely controlled anger. "You abandoned that word long ago, the day you pushed me off that cliff." Silence hung thickly between us, charged with unresolved pain. Sarah stepped back, eyes dropping in quiet defeat. But Robert held his ground stubbornly. "You've done fine, haven't you? Look around, Emma. It clearly didn't harm you." His words sliced deeply, reopening wounds I had carefully hidden beneath strength and success. My heart hammered furiously, yet amid the turmoil, I found myself surprisingly calm, a quiet strength rising slowly within me. "You know nothing about harm," I finally answered, voice gentle yet firm. "The bruises faded, the bones healed, but the scars you left run deeper than you'll ever understand." Robert opened his mouth, ready to argue, but I raised my hand calmly, silencing him immediately. "I'm done being your safety net," I continued, feeling something powerful stir within me. "I won't let you hurt me again." Sarah's eyes widened, recognizing the resolve in my voice. "Emma, please, leave," I interrupted softly, firmly holding her gaze, "and don't ever come back here again." After a tense pause, Robert took Sarah's arm roughly, guiding her toward the door. Their departure felt surreal, echoes of the past finally leaving my sanctuary. As the door closed softly behind them, I sank weakly into a nearby chair, hands trembling uncontrollably. That night, I stood alone by the boutique window long after closing, heart heavy yet strangely relieved. Streetlights glistened softly through the glass, casting reflections of the life I'd built. Yet, beneath my reflection, I could still see fragments of that frightened 8-year-old girl. The chime suddenly rang softly again, startling me. I turned quickly, heart leaping with irrational fear. It was only Martha, her familiar, comforting presence instantly grounding me. "I had a feeling you'd still be here," she said gently, stepping closer. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" The warmth of her voice broke something deep within me, tears finally spilling freely down my cheeks. "They came back, Martha. My parents. They haven't changed." She nodded knowingly, stepping closer to gently take my shaking hands in hers. "And you stood up to them?" "Yes," I whispered softly, trembling. "But why do I still feel so broken?" "Because healing isn't simple," Martha replied gently. "Confronting pain isn't about erasing it, it's about acknowledging it and not allowing it to control you anymore." I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, allowing her words to settle inside me. As Martha softly embraced me, a realization quietly dawned. I had spent so long proving I was strong that I'd forgotten it was okay to feel fragile, to acknowledge pain instead of burying it. "Will it ever fully stop hurting?" I asked quietly, desperately. She smiled gently, eyes filled with deep understanding. "Maybe not fully, Emma, but each time you confront it, you become stronger. You reclaim a little more of yourself." We stood quietly together by the window, reflections blending in the soft glow of streetlights. For the first time, I understood clearly that scars weren't weaknesses. They were proof of survival, powerful reminders that I had faced darkness and found my way back to the light. And though shadows of my past still lingered, I finally felt brave enough to acknowledge them. Not as failures or fears, but as essential parts of my story, pieces woven carefully into the woman I'd fought to become. In the days after confronting my parents, a quiet heaviness settled over me. I continued opening the boutique each morning, greeting customers warmly and managing orders efficiently, yet beneath my composed exterior, anxiety simmered relentlessly. The encounter had torn open wounds I'd spent years carefully stitching closed, and each quiet moment alone felt overwhelming. Sleepless nights became my new normal. Memories would creep in, vivid and suffocating, my parents' cold eyes, my own helplessness as a child tumbling through the air. Each nightmare jolted me awake, heart racing, breathing ragged, leaving me shaken and restless until dawn. One evening, utterly exhausted, I finally reached for my phone, hands trembling as I dialed the familiar number. My therapist, Dr. Lauren Bennett. "Emma?" she answered softly, recognizing my hesitation immediately. "Are you okay?" My voice trembled as I spoke. "I thought I'd moved past this, but now it's all back, stronger somehow." "That's because healing isn't linear, Doctor," Bennett gently reminded me. "When old wounds reopen, it's your mind asking you to face them more deeply. This isn't weakness, it's courage." In therapy, we carefully explored layers I'd previously avoided. Each session peeled back more pain, anger, and betrayal, allowing emotions I'd once hidden deep inside to finally surface. It was painful, often overwhelming, yet oddly liberating. One afternoon, as I arranged dresses on the boutique racks, a young woman entered. She approached cautiously, admiring each garment with genuine awe. Noticing her hesitation, I stepped forward gently. Can I help you find something special? I asked softly, smiling warmly. Her eyes brightened, yet uncertainty lingered. I'm looking for a dress, but nothing seems to fit how I feel. Does that make sense? I nodded knowingly, touched by her honesty. Tell me, how do you feel? She hesitated, eyes glistening softly. I feel like I'm trying so hard to be strong, but inside, everything feels messy, fragile. My heart tightened with empathy. Quietly, I guided her toward a collection I'd designed during my most vulnerable moments. Each dress was intentionally imperfect, fabric sewn deliberately with raw edges, mismatched seams, a visible representation of beauty found in imperfection. These, I explained gently, voice steady with understanding, are dresses meant for someone brave enough to embrace their imperfections. Someone like you. Tears shimmered in her eyes. You designed these? Yes, I confessed softly. They're inspired by my own journey through pain and healing. As she carefully chose one dress, her expression softened, relieved and seen. The encounter stayed with me deeply, a quiet reminder that my vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was powerful, a connection forged through shared humanity. That evening, Martha called, checking in as she often did. I shared the experience quietly, voice thick with emotion. You gave her permission to heal, Emma, Martha said warmly, just like you've learned to give yourself. Weeks turned into months, therapy sessions slowly weaving together pieces of my fragmented past. Gradually, I learned to acknowledge my scars without shame, understanding they weren't burdens to hide but reminders of my resilience. Each breakthrough felt small yet monumental, a deeper understanding of who I was, apart from the trauma I'd endured. One quiet weekend, Martha visited me in Beverly Hills. As we sat together on my apartment balcony, stars shimmering softly above, I finally voiced my lingering fear. What if the pain never fully disappears, Martha? Will I always carry this? She considered carefully, her voice gentle yet firm. Perhaps, but maybe your pain isn't meant to disappear completely. Maybe it's meant to remind you how far you've come. It's your guide, not your burden. I nodded slowly, absorbing her wisdom. I feel guilty sometimes, for not being stronger. She squeezed my hand gently, voice fierce with tenderness. Emma, strength isn't denying your wounds. It's owning them, living alongside them, choosing compassion over bitterness despite everything. That's exactly what you've done. Her words settled deep inside me, a powerful realization finally taking root. I'd spent years trying to prove myself strong by hiding pain, but true strength lay in openness, vulnerability, and acceptance of my own humanity. Days later, I stood in my boutique again, sketchbook in hand. I began designing something entirely new, a gown woven from delicate silk, embroidered meticulously with intricate patterns reflecting my journey. Each stitch would represent scars I'd learned to accept, each embellishment a symbol of growth, vulnerability, and resilience. As the final design took shape beneath my fingertips, I felt something shift deeply within me. The act of creation became a gentle declaration. My past could coexist alongside my present, beautifully and imperfectly intertwined. When I unveiled the gown weeks later at a small private showing, the audience fell silent, moved by the authenticity expressed in fabric and thread. I stood quietly, watching reactions ripple softly through the small gathering. Among the faces, I noticed the young woman who'd visited my boutique, her eyes filled with tears of recognition and gratitude. As applause filled the room, gentle yet powerful, I finally understood that true healing wasn't about achieving perfection or erasing pain. It was learning to transform that pain into purpose. Healing meant setting boundaries, not as barriers, but as acts of self-respect, protecting the beauty that grows uniquely from wounds we bravely face. Standing before that small crowd, beneath soft lights, I allowed myself to smile genuinely, not because the journey was over or complete, but because I'd found peace within its imperfection. I'd finally embraced my story fully, owning every scar and stitch, proud of the woman I'd become not in spite of my past, but precisely because of it. 5 years had passed since I'd first opened my boutique, yet each anniversary felt like the first, a mix of pride, gratitude, and quiet disbelief at how far I'd come. The boutique was softly lit by warm golden lights, elegant dresses carefully displayed, whispering my story through fabric and thread. Standing quietly near the window, I watched evening fall gently over Rodeo Drive. Outside, pedestrians moved briskly, absorbed in their own worlds, unaware of the quiet, fragile victory I was celebrating tonight. My fingers absent-mindedly traced patterns on the cold glass, thoughts drifting to memories of darker times that had led me here. A gentle tap on my shoulder startled me slightly, pulling me from my reverie. I turned to find Martha standing quietly beside me, a warm smile brightening her familiar, comforting face. Her presence instantly softened the tension in my shoulders. "It's beautiful tonight," she said softly, gazing around the boutique. Her voice was full of quiet pride and deep affection. "You've built something truly special, Emma." I managed a weak smile, my heart squeezing slightly. "I still can't fully believe it, Martha. Sometimes it feels like it could disappear overnight." She gently squeezed my shoulder, her eyes understanding. "It won't disappear. You've fought too hard to lose it now." I nodded slowly, breathing deeply. Yet beneath the surface, lingering unease tightened in my chest, shadows still whispering faint doubts and fears. The scars I'd carried for so long didn't vanish simply because I'd succeeded. They remained quietly present, an integral part of me that I was still learning to accept. The boutique filled gradually with familiar faces, loyal customers, fellow designers, and close friends I'd gained along this complicated journey. They congratulated me warmly, offering sincere smiles and quiet embraces, yet my inner uncertainty lingered beneath the warm exchanges. As the evening unfolded, I found myself stepping back, quietly observing the room from a distance. From this vantage point, I realized the people who genuinely loved and supported me far outnumbered those who had hurt me. It was a simple truth, yet profound enough to shake loose a quiet peace within me. My gaze settled back toward the window, eyes scanning the now quiet streets outside. A young mother walked past, holding tightly to her daughter's hand, the child gazing up with innocent trust. Watching them, a sudden ache filled my chest, a gentle yet bittersweet longing for the childhood I'd lost, a grief for what I'd never have, but also gratitude for the family I'd found in Martha and Tom. As if sensing my internal turmoil, Martha reappeared silently by my side, her presence comforting and reassuring. "What are you thinking, Emma?" she asked softly. I hesitated, allowing the emotions to wash gently over me. That healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing how we let it shape us. I still feel broken sometimes, Martha, but I'm starting to understand that's okay. She nodded gently, eyes filled with warmth and pride. "Broken pieces can be beautiful, sweetheart. That's what makes your journey powerful. You're not perfect, but you're beautifully real." Her words resonated deeply, settling quietly within me. I'd spent so much energy fighting for perfection, yet real healing meant embracing imperfection, allowing myself grace in my vulnerability. A sudden, unexpected clarity took root in that moment. I didn't need perfect closure to feel complete. My journey was messy, complicated, and sometimes painful, but it was authentically mine. I'd built something beautiful from ruins, finding strength not in flawless healing but in honest acceptance. Outside, streetlights flickered gently, casting soft shadows across the pavement. The city had quieted, a gentle calm settling after a busy day. Martha and I stood side by side, quietly observing the stillness, no longer needing words to fill the silence. A soft chime pulled my attention back, the door gently opening to reveal Tom, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, the kind he'd often brought home to Martha. His gentle smile reached me warmly. "Am I late?" he teased lightly, handing me the flowers with genuine affection. I smiled softly, accepting the small bouquet gratefully, heart warming at the simplicity of their love and support. "You're just on time, Tom." As the night grew quieter, the guests gradually left, their goodbyes warm and heartfelt. When the boutique was finally empty again, I stood quietly, flowers in hand, a gentle peace settling within me. My life was far from perfect, scars still present beneath the surface, yet for the first time that imperfection felt quietly comforting, proof that I'd survived, proof that I was strong enough to keep moving forward. Standing in the gentle stillness, softly lit beneath the boutique's warm glow, I finally allowed myself a moment of genuine pride. Not because everything was healed, but because I'd learned to live fully despite the broken parts. I'd found a quiet strength, imperfect yet real. Late that night, after the boutique had emptied and silence once again filled the softly lit space, I sat alone by the window, holding Tom's bouquet loosely in my hands. My reflection stared back gently from the darkened glass, older, softer, marked by quiet triumph and lingering scars alike. I had finally learned not to fear those scars, understanding instead how deeply they defined my strength. My phone buzzed softly beside me, pulling me gently from my thoughts. Glancing down, I smiled. Martha's familiar name lit up the screen. I answered quietly, her voice instantly calming my restless heart. "I just wanted to check in before bed," she said softly, warmth evident in her tone. "How are you feeling, Emma?" I hesitated briefly, reflecting deeply before answering honestly. "I'm okay, Martha. Not perfect, but strong enough to keep moving forward." There was a gentle pause, her quiet understanding crossing the distance effortlessly. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Remember, you don't need to have it all figured out. Life isn't meant to be perfectly tidy." I nodded slowly, though she couldn't see me. I'm finally starting to accept that. After we said goodnight, I set the phone down gently, eyes lingering on the dark, empty streets outside. A quiet, imperfect peace settled softly within me. I felt it clearly, the realization that healing wasn't a single moment of triumph, but rather countless small moments, choices made daily to embrace authenticity over perfection, resilience over resentment. In the days following the anniversary event, I began crafting a new design, one deeply personal, unlike anything I'd created before. Each day, after the boutique closed, I spent quiet evenings sketching, carefully stitching fabric piece by piece. The gown took shape slowly, deliberately imperfect, raw edges intentionally left exposed, subtle contrasts in texture and color sewn thoughtfully into each seam. Weeks later, Martha visited again, entering my small studio quietly, eyes immediately drawn to the gown displayed at the center of the room. She stepped closer, gently touching the delicate fabric, fingertips tracing carefully along intentionally unfinished seams. "This is extraordinary, Emma," she whispered softly, admiration evident in her eyes. "It's so perfectly imperfect." I smiled gently, heart warmed deeply by her recognition. That's exactly what I wanted it to be. A few months later, I chose to display the gown in the boutique window, beneath a small plaque inscribed simply, "Imperfect Freedom, Beauty Born from Brokenness." The gown quickly attracted attention, customers quietly moved by the raw honesty expressed within its design. Each time someone paused to examine it closely, I felt quietly proud, knowing my vulnerability had created something meaningful. Beauty openly embracing scars, strength openly acknowledging pain. One quiet evening, as I prepared to close the boutique, a familiar yet unexpected figure appeared hesitantly outside the door. Sarah, my mother. She stood uncertainly beneath the streetlights, visibly older, her eyes now softened by genuine regret. My heart twisted painfully, memories briefly resurfacing, sharp and vivid. Yet something inside me had shifted. I felt neither anger nor fear, only a quiet strength born from acceptance of my story. I opened the door slowly, calmly meeting her uncertain gaze. "Emma?" she began softly, voice trembling slightly. I I didn't come to ask for anything this time, just to say, I'm truly sorry." Her eyes met mine, sincerity clear beneath layers of regret. I considered quietly, emotions swirling gently within me. Finally, I nodded slowly, my voice calm but firm. "I forgive you," I replied gently, meaning every word. "But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. We can't rebuild what we never had. We can only move forward separately in peace." Her eyes filled quietly with tears, but she nodded slowly, understanding clearly the boundary I'd gently but firmly set. She stepped back, turning slowly to walk away, leaving behind a quiet space of closure and acceptance. After she disappeared into the night, I closed the boutique door softly, breathing deeply. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, nor did it mean allowing past pain to dictate my future. It meant setting myself free from the weight of anger and resentment. That night, alone in my apartment, I wrote quietly in my journal, a simple yet powerful truth finally clear within my heart. Healing is not about erasing scars, but learning how to live fully and beautifully alongside them. As I closed the journal gently, peace settled quietly within me. An imperfect freedom I'd fought so long to find, shaped by every scar, every wound, every courageous moment I'd embraced despite fear. I didn't know exactly what the future held, only that I was ready to meet it fully, authentically, courageously, imperfections and all. Outside, dawn slowly broke across the sky, gentle light softly touching the horizon, quietly hopeful, imperfectly beautiful, ready to begin again.